Chapter C7.2 of the Anarchist FAQ. What role does the market play in the business cycle? A major problem with capitalism is the working of the capital market itself. For the supporters of free market capitalism, the market provides all the necessary information required to make investment and production decisions. This means that a rise or fall in the price of a commodity acts as a signal to everyone in the market, who then respond to that signal. These responses will be coordinated by the market, resulting in a healthy economy. This perspective is expressed well by right liberal Friedrich von Hayek in his The Uses of Knowledge in Society, reprinted in his Individualism and Economic Order. Using the example of the tin market, he defends capitalism against central planning on its ability to handle the division of knowledge within society and its dynamic use of this dispersed knowledge when demand or supply changes. Assume, he argues, that somewhere in the world a new opportunity for the use of some raw material, say tin, has arisen, or that one of the sources of supply of tin has been eliminated. It does not matter for our purpose, and it is very significant that it does not matter which of these two causes has made the tin more scarce. All that the users of the tin need to know is that some of the tin they used to consume is now more profitably employed elsewhere, and that, in consequence, they must economize tin. There is no need for the great majority of them even to know where the more urgent need has arisen, or in favor of what other uses they ought to husband the supply. The subsequent rise in its price will result in reduced consumption, as many users will economize on its use, and so the information that tin has become relatively scarcer spreads throughout the economy and influences not only tin users, but also its substitutes and the substitutes of these substitutes, and so on. This will move the economy towards equilibrium without the people informed knowing anything about the original causes for these changes. The whole acts as one market, not because of its members survey the whole field, but because their limited individual fields sufficiently overlap, so that though through many intermediaries the relevant information is communicated to all. The Use of Knowledge in Society from the American Economic Review. While it can be granted that this account of the market is not without foundation, it is also clear that the price mechanism does not communicate all the relevant information needed by companies or individuals. This means that capitalism does not work in the way suggested in the economics textbooks. It is the working of the price mechanism itself which leads to booms and slumps in economic activity and the resulting human and social costs they entail. This can be seen if we investigate the actual processes hidden behind the workings of the price mechanism. The key problem with Hayek's assumption is that he does not discuss the collective results of the individual decisions he highlights. It is true that faced with the rise in the price of tin, individual firms will cut back on its use. Yet, there is no reason to suppose that the net result of these actions will bring the demand and supply of tin back to equilibrium. In fact, it is just as likely that the reduction in demand for tin is such that its producers face falling sales and so cut back the production even more. Similarly, a rising demand for tin can easily result in all tin producers increasing supply so much as to produce a glut on the market. Proudhon described this process well in the 1840s. A peasant who has harvested 20 sacks of wheat, which he with his family proposes to consume, deems himself twice as rich as if he had harvested only 10. Likewise, a housewife who has spun 50 yards of linen believes she is twice as rich if she had spun but 25. Relatively to the household, both are right. Looked at in their external relations, they may be utterly mistaken. If the crop of wheat is double throughout the whole country, 20 sacks will sell for less than 10 would have sold for if it had been but half as great. So, under similar circumstances, 50 yards of linen will be worth less than 25, so the value decreases as the production of utility increases, as a producer may arrive at poverty by continually enriching himself. A system of economic contradictions. He argued that this occurred due to the contradiction of the double character of value between value in use and value in exchange. As John O'Neill argues, basing himself on Marx rather than Proudhon, when producers make plans concerning future production, they are planning not with respect of demand at the present moment, but with respect to expected demand at some future moment, when their product reaches the market. The price mechanism provides information that indicates the relationship between supply and demand now, while this information is relevant to producers' plans, and it is not all information that is relevant or is required by those involved. It cannot provide information which will allow producers to predict demand later. A major component of the information required for such prediction is that the plans of other producers which respond to that demand. This is information that the market, as a complex system, fails to distribute. It is this information restriction which is one of the sources of why there is a business cycle. This is because each producer responds to the same signal, the change in price. However, each agent acts independently of the response of other producers and consumers. The result is an overproduction of goods in relation to effective demands for them. Goods cannot be sold, there is a realization crisis. Producers cannot realize the value of their products. Given this overproduction, demand falls against supply. There is a slump. This eventually leads to a rise in demand against supply. Production expands, leading to another boom, and so on. This information cannot be supplied due to competition. Simply put, if A and B are in competition, if A informs B of her activities and B does not reciprocate, then B is in a position to compete more effectively than A. Hence, communication within the market is discouraged and each production unit is isolated from the rest. In other words, each person or company responds to the same signal, the change in price, but each acts independently of the response of other producers and consumers. The result is often a slump in the market, causing unemployment and economic disruption. Thus, the market blocks the communication of information and fails to coordinate plans for economic action. This, it should be noted, is not a problem of people making a series of unrelated mistakes. Rather, it is that the market imparts the same information to affected agents, and this information is such that the rational strategy for all agents is to expand production or contract consumption, while it is not rational for all agents to act in this manner collectively. In other words, the information the market provides is not sufficient for rational decision making and naturally results in disproportionalities in the market. Thus, the price mechanism actively encourages the suppression of mutual exchange of information concerning planned responses to current prices, and this leads to overproduction. So it is not a question of inaccurate prediction, although given that the future is unknowable and unpredictable, this is a factor. Instead, it is one of individually rational responses to the same signal, resulting in collectively irrational responses. This means that prices in themselves do not provide adequate knowledge for rational decision making, as they are not at their long-run equilibrium levels. This causes a problem for Hayek's account of the market process, as he stresses that actual prices never are at this purely theoretical price. As we discussed in section C8, Hayek's own theory of the business cycle shows the negative impact which the misinformation conveyed by disequilibrium prices can cause on the economy. In that analysis, the disequilibrium price that leads to very substantial macroeconomic distortions is the rate of interest, but obviously the same argument applies for commodity prices as well. This means that the market process based on the reaction of profit maximizing firms to the same unsustainable prices for a commodity can generating malinvestment and subsequent market disruptions on a wide level. Simply put, the price mechanism may carry information regarding the terms on which various commodities may currently be exchanged, but it does not follow that a knowledge of these exchange ratios enable agents to calculate the future profitability of their production decisions. Social usefulness is, of course, of no concern. In this irrationality and lack of information which feeds into the business cycle, these local booms and slumps in production are then amplified into general crises precisely through the interconnections in the market that Hayek highlights in his example of the production and consumption of tin. O'Neill. The relative effects of overproduction in one market will be passed on to those which supply it with goods in the shapes of decreased demand. These firms will now exercise relative overproduction, which in turn will affect their suppliers. Whatever benefits may accrue to consumers of these goods in the shape of lower prices will be reduced as demand for their products drops, as more and more workers are made unemployed or their wages are cut, which means that real wages remain constant as prices are falling alongside money wages. See section C9.1 for details. Firms will also seek to hoard money, leading to yet more falling demand for goods, and so unemployed labor is joined by underutilization of capacity. Which brings us to the issue of money and its role in the business cycle. Free market capitalist economics is based on Say's law. This is the notion that supply creates its own demand, and so general gluts of goods and mass unemployment are impossible. As we noted in section C1.5, this vision of economic activity is only suited to pre-capitalist economies, or ones without money, for money is considered as nothing more than an aid to barter, a medium of exchange only. It ignores the fact that money is a store of value, and as such can be held onto precisely for that reason. This means that Say's law is invalid, as its unity between sale and purchase can be distributed, so causing the chain of contractual relationships to be broken. Simply put, someone who sells a product need not spend their income on another product at the same time. Unlike barter, the sale of one commodity is an act distinct from the purchase of another. Money, in other words, brings in time into the market processes and the possibility of hoarding. Time, because a good is usually sold sometime after it is made, running the risk that its sale price could fall below the cost of production, wiping out the capitalist's expected profit. Hoarding, because income need not be spent, but may merely be kept idle. Doug Henwood in Wall Street. This means that overproduction becomes possible and bankruptcies and unemployment can become widespread, and so a slump can start. Any Marxian or Keynesian crisis theory can tell you, Henwood summarizes, the separation of purchase and sale is one of the greatest flashpoints of capitalism. An expected sale that goes unmade can drive a capitalist under, and can unravel a chain of financial commitments. Multiply that by 1,000 or 2, and you have a great potential mischief. Thus, the presence of money as a store of value, possibly of keeping wealth in financial form rather than spending it promptly on commodities, always introduces the possibility of crisis. That is, the possibility of an excess of capital lacking a profitable investment outlet, and an excess of goods that couldn't be sold profitably in the open market. So, when the market price of goods fall far below their cost prices, then production and investment stagnate. This is because profits can only be transformed into capital at a loss, and so it lies idle in banks. Thus, unemployed labor is associated with unemployed capital, for example, excess money. This desire for capitalists to increase their demand for storing their wealth in money rather than investing it is driven by the rate of profit in the economy. Bad times will result in increased hoarding and so a general fall in aggregate demand. Lowering interest rates will not provoke a demand for such money hoards and claims in free market capitalist theory, as few capitalists will seek to invest in a recession, as expected profits will be lower than the interest rate. However, it should be stressed that the disproportionalities of production between industries and the separation of production and sale do not per se result in a general crisis. If that were the case, the capitalism would be in a constant state of crisis, as markets are rarely in a state of equilibrium and sales do not instantly result in purchases. This means that market dislocations need not automatically produce a general crisis in the economy. The problem associated with localized slumps can be handled when the overall condition within the economy is good. It simply provides the potential for crisis and means of transmitting and generalizing local slumps when the overall economic situation is weak. In other words, it is an accumulative process in which small changes can build upon each other until the pressures they exert become unstoppable. The key thing to remember is that capitalism is an inherently dynamic system which consists of different aspects which develop unevenly, disproportionately. Production, credit, finance market, circulation of money and goods, investment, wages, profits, as well as specific markets get out of step. An economic crisis occurs when this process gets too far out of line. This process also applies to investment as well. So far, we have assumed that firms adjust to price changes without seeking new investment. This, of course, is unlikely to always be the case. As we discussed in section C8, this analysis of the market providing incomplete information also applies to the market for credit and other forms of external financing. And this results in a situation where the problems associated with overproduction can be amplified by overinvestment. This means that the problems associated with markets creating disproportionalities are combined with the problems resulting from increased productivity and capital investment, which are discussed in the next section.